Tom had been looking forward to a quiet weekend at his family's small cabin near the lake. For weeks he had been busy with work, deadlines, and endless meetings that seemed to never stop. The cabin was his escape, a place where he could sit by the fire, listen to the soft sound of the water, and read the books he had been saving for months. On Friday morning he packed his bags, loaded the car, and drove away with a smile. The cabin was peaceful as always. The trees stood tall, the air felt fresh, and the nights were filled with stars. Tom spent the first evening fishing, cooking a simple meal, and resting in a chair on the porch. By Saturday night, however, he felt he had enjoyed enough of the calm silence. He missed the comfort of his own home, and the thought of spending Sunday in his own living room sounded even better than staying until Monday. With that thought in mind, he decided to return home a day early. On Sunday morning he cleaned up the cabin, locked the doors, and set off on the familiar road back to his neighborhood. The drive was pleasant, filled with the golden light of early autumn. The leaves had started changing colors, and the cool breeze from the open window made the ride even better. Tom hummed softly to the music playing on the radio, glad he had made the decision to come home earlier than planned. When he turned onto his street, he immediately noticed how quiet everything was. Most neighbors were still asleep, and the air carried that calm stillness that only comes on Sunday mornings. Tom pulled into his driveway and parked his car. He stepped out and stretched, enjoying the sight of his home once again. His small garden looked fine, the porch light was still working, and everything seemed in order. He was happy to be back. As he carried his bag toward the front door, Tom caught sight of someone standing across the street. It was Karen, the head of the homeowners association. She was known by everyone in the neighborhood for her strict rules and constant watch over what people did with their homes. If a lawn grew even a little too high, Karen would notice. If a trash can stayed out for more than a day, Karen would mention it at the next meeting. Tom had never had a serious issue with her before, but he knew she loved to keep an eye on everyone. Karen stood on her front porch with her arms crossed, staring at him in silence. Tom gave her a polite nod, hoping to avoid any unnecessary talk, but she did not smile back. Instead, she tilted her head as if trying to figure out why he was home. Tom unlocked his front door and placed his bag inside. He was just about to bring in the rest of his belongings when he heard the sharp sound of Karen's footsteps approaching. Turning around, he saw her walking quickly toward his driveway with a clipboard in her hand. "Good morning, Karen," Tom said in a friendly tone, trying to keep the moment light. Karen frowned slightly and replied, "You were supposed to be gone until tomorrow." "Why are you back already?" Tom blinked in surprise. "Well, it is my cabin. I decided to come home early." "Is there a problem with that?" Karen pursed her lips and tapped her pen against the clipboard. "I just find it unusual. We have certain expectations here in the neighborhood, and when people change their plans suddenly, it can be concerning." Tom held back a laugh. He had never heard anyone say that coming home early was against neighborhood expectations. He shrugged and answered kindly, "I just missed home. I do not think it should be a big deal." Karen did not seem satisfied. She scribbled something quickly on her clipboard, glancing at him every few seconds. Tom shook his head and went back to unloading his car. He hoped that would be the end of the conversation, but Karen stood there longer than necessary, watching closely as if she expected him to do something wrong. After a few minutes, Tom carried the last of his bags inside and closed the door. Through the window he noticed Karen still standing outside, talking on her phone. She paced back and forth, gesturing with her free hand as though she was explaining something serious. Tom wondered what could possibly be worth such a fuss so early in the morning. He thought about stepping outside to ask her directly, but decided against it. The best thing, he thought, was to let her finish her call and move on. Inside his home, Tom placed his bags by the couch and sat down for a moment. The familiar comfort of his living room made him smile. He was glad to be back earlier than planned. He poured himself a glass of water and began to think about how he would spend the rest of the day. Maybe he would cook something nice for lunch or take a short walk around the neighborhood. But the peace did not last long. From the corner of his eye, he noticed flashing lights reflecting through his window. At first he thought it was nothing, but as the sound of a car door shutting echoed outside, Tom realized it was a police car. Confused, he stood up and looked out the window. The sight of a sheriff walking toward his house left him puzzled. Karen was standing nearby, pointing in his direction while speaking quickly to the officer. Neighbors were beginning to peek out from their windows, curious about what was happening. Tom sighed and rubbed his forehead, already guessing what had happened. He opened the front door slowly and stepped outside, waiting for the sheriff to approach. Karen's eyes were sharp, and her posture was stiff with self-importance. Tom knew this was only the beginning of what might turn into an unusual day. The sheriff walked with steady steps toward Tom's house. His uniform was neat, his hat slightly tilted forward, and his eyes calm but watchful. Tom stood at the edge of his porch, hands resting by his sides, waiting to hear what this was about. Karen stayed only a few steps behind the sheriff, her clipboard still tucked under her arm, her lips pressed tightly together as if she had been rehearsing what to say. "Good morning," the sheriff greeted, his voice steady. "Are you the owner of this house?" "Yes, sir, I am," Tom replied politely. "My name is Tom." "Is there a problem?" Before the sheriff could answer, Karen stepped forward, raising her hand like a student eager to speak in class. "Officer, this man is not supposed to be here today. He was supposed to be away at his cabin. I saw him come back suddenly, and it looked suspicious. I believe he might be trespassing, or at the very least, breaking community guidelines." The sheriff turned his head toward her, raising an eyebrow. "Ma'am, are you saying you believe the homeowner is trespassing on his own property?" Karen crossed her arms and said firmly, "I am saying his return was unexpected. We have rules about how our neighborhood is maintained, and sudden behavior like this is concerning. I thought it best to call for safety." Tom kept his expression calm, though inside he felt both surprised and slightly amused. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet. Handing his driver's license to the sheriff, he spoke with patience. "This is my identification. My name matches the deed to this house. I came back early from my cabin because I wanted to rest here instead. That is all." The sheriff looked at the license, then back at Tom. He asked, "Do you have any proof of ownership for the property? Maybe a piece of mail with your name on it?" "Of course," Tom said. He stepped inside and returned within seconds with a recent utility bill. He handed it over without hesitation. The sheriff examined the paper, nodded, and handed it back. "Everything checks out. You live here. You have every right to be on your property." Karen's face turned red, though she tried to keep her composure. "But officer, you do not understand. He was not supposed to be here until tomorrow. He changed his plans without telling anyone. That seems strange, does it not?" The sheriff adjusted his hat and spoke firmly, "Ma'am, changing personal plans is not against the law. This man has shown proof that he is the homeowner. There is no crime here." Tom stood silently, watching as the sheriff's calm words seemed to weigh heavily on Karen. She shifted on her feet, glanced toward the growing number of neighbors peeking through their curtains, and tightened her grip on her clipboard. "Sir," Tom finally said, "I am sorry you had to come out here for this. I had no idea returning home early would cause such concern." The sheriff shook his head. "You have nothing to apologize for. It is my duty to respond when a call is made, but in this case, there is no issue." Karen quickly interrupted again. "But what about the rules of the homeowners association? He might not be breaking the law, but surely there is something wrong here. If people come and go without notice, how can we maintain order in the neighborhood?" The sheriff looked at her directly, his voice now carrying a firmer tone. "Ma'am, HOA rules are not enforced by law enforcement. If you have a neighborhood issue, that is something you need to handle within your association. But making false claims and calling the police for no real reason is not acceptable. This could be considered wasting police resources." The neighbors who had quietly gathered outside began whispering to one another. Some nodded their heads in agreement with the sheriff. Others simply stared at Karen, surprised that she had taken her watchfulness so far. Karen's lips trembled as she tried to find her next words. She looked around, realizing that more eyes were on her than on Tom. For the first time, she appeared uncertain. Tom, keeping his voice even, said, "Karen, I respect the neighborhood rules, and I always try to follow them. But returning home early is a personal choice. I never thought I would need to inform anyone of such a thing. I believe we should all feel comfortable in our own homes without unnecessary trouble." The sheriff gave a small nod of approval. "That is a fair point," he said. Karen opened her mouth to reply but stopped herself. Instead, she gave a sharp turn, muttered something under her breath, and walked back toward her house, her shoulders stiff and her face flushed. The sheriff turned back to Tom. "If she continues to cause you trouble or makes more false reports, you are welcome to contact our office. We keep records of these calls, and repeated misuse of emergency services can have consequences." "I appreciate that, officer," Tom said sincerely. "I hope it does not come to that. I just want to enjoy my home like everyone else." The sheriff tipped his hat slightly. "That is your right. Enjoy your day." With that, he walked back to his car, the flashing lights now turned off. Tom stood on his porch for a moment, watching the neighbors slowly retreat into their homes. A few of them gave him small waves, and he waved back, understanding that they had witnessed the entire scene. When the sheriff's car drove away, silence returned to the street. Tom let out a deep breath and stepped back inside. He set the documents down on the table and sat for a while, reflecting on what had just happened. What surprised him most was not Karen's behavior, since he already knew she had a reputation for being strict, but the fact that she had gone so far as to call the police simply because he returned home early. It seemed unreasonable, and yet it had unfolded right in front of him. As he looked around his living room, Tom reminded himself not to let the incident spoil his day. He was home, he was safe, and the sheriff had confirmed his rights. Whatever Karen thought, she had been corrected in front of the entire neighborhood. Tom smiled slightly, thinking that perhaps this unexpected visit might even change how some neighbors viewed Karen's constant watch over everyone. For now, though, he chose not to worry about it. He stood, walked into the kitchen, and began preparing himself a simple meal, determined to enjoy the peace of his own home. The sun shone through the window, and the sound of birds outside reminded him of why he loved this place. No matter how unusual the morning had been, Tom knew the day was still his to enjoy. The quiet on the street after the sheriff left did not last very long. Though people had returned inside their homes, the morning's unusual event lingered in the air. Curtains moved, blinds shifted, and now and then a face could be seen peeking out at Tom's house. The neighbors had seen everything, and word was already spreading from one house to another. Tom tried to ignore it at first. He sat at his kitchen table, enjoying the meal he had prepared. The food tasted good, and the calm of his home felt better than anything else. But he could not fully push the thought away. He wondered how long this moment would stay in the minds of those living nearby. A little while later, Tom stepped outside with a broom in his hand. He wanted to sweep the porch and enjoy some fresh air. As he moved the broom across the wooden boards, he noticed his next-door neighbor, Mr. Allen, walking over. Mr. Allen was an older man with a gentle smile and kind eyes. He lived alone since his children had moved out, and he often stopped to chat with Tom whenever their paths crossed. "Morning, Tom," Mr. Allen greeted warmly. "I saw what happened earlier." "Are you all right?" Tom nodded. "Yes, I am fine. It was unexpected, but the sheriff handled it well." Mr. Allen chuckled softly. "I imagine so. Karen does not know when to stop, does she? She has been keeping herself busy with her clipboard for as long as I can remember." Tom leaned on the broom and smiled faintly. "I knew she liked to watch everyone closely, but I never thought she would call the police because I came home a day early." "Well, now the whole neighborhood knows how far she is willing to go," Mr. Allen said with a shake of his head. "She wanted to embarrass you, but it looks like she embarrassed herself instead." The two men shared a light laugh before Mr. Allen continued down the street for his morning walk. Tom returned to his sweeping, feeling a bit lighter after the short conversation. Not long after, another neighbor appeared. This time it was Lisa, a young mother who lived across the street. She had her little daughter with her, and they were on their way to the small park nearby. She paused when she saw Tom. "Hi, Tom," Lisa said kindly. "I am sorry about what happened earlier. We were all watching, and it seemed so unnecessary. I hope you are not too upset." Tom smiled and shook his head. "Thank you, Lisa. I am fine. It was surprising, but I am glad the sheriff cleared things up." Lisa nodded, her daughter tugging gently at her hand. "If it makes you feel any better, most of us know you are a good neighbor. You keep your yard clean, you never cause problems, and you are polite to everyone. Honestly, people are starting to get tired of Karen's constant complaints." "That means a lot to hear," Tom replied sincerely. "I only want to live peacefully here like everyone else." Lisa smiled, wished him a good day, and continued walking with her daughter. As the hours passed, Tom began to notice a pattern. Neighbors who normally kept to themselves were now greeting him more openly. Some gave small waves, some smiled, and others even stopped to make short conversation. It was clear that the morning's incident had created a small shift in the neighborhood. By afternoon, Tom decided to take a short walk around the block. He wanted to stretch his legs and clear his mind. As he walked, he could not help but notice Karen's house. The blinds were shut tightly, and there was no sign of her outside. For someone who usually spent half her time on the porch, keeping an eye on everything, her absence was very noticeable. Tom wondered if she was hiding because of embarrassment. After all, the sheriff had corrected her in front of half the street. Still, he did not wish her any harm. He only hoped she would learn from the experience and stop creating problems where there were none. Halfway through his walk, Tom ran into another neighbor, Mrs. Green, who was watering her flowers. She was cheerful and friendly, known for baking pies and sharing them during community gatherings. She smiled at him warmly. "Hello, Tom," she greeted. "You know, I am glad you stood calm this morning. Some people would have lost their temper, but you handled it with patience. That says a lot about your character." Tom gave a small smile. "Thank you, Mrs. Green. I figured getting upset would not help. The truth was on my side, and I trusted that it would come out." Mrs. Green nodded. "And it did. Everyone saw it. Do not worry about what Karen did. If anything, she has only shown the rest of us how unfair she can be." Tom thanked her for the kind words and continued his walk. By the time he returned home, he felt more at ease than he had in the morning. Though the situation had been uncomfortable, it had revealed something important. Many of his neighbors respected him, and they were not blind to Karen's behavior. That evening, Tom sat on his porch with a cup of tea in his hand. The sun was setting, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink. The street had grown quiet again, but this time it felt different. There was a new sense of understanding between him and the neighbors, as though an invisible line had been drawn. Tom thought about how quickly a normal day could turn into something unusual. He had left his cabin early for rest, never expecting that his return would lead to a police visit. Yet now, as he watched the sun fade, he felt thankful. What had started as a stressful morning had turned into an opportunity for the neighborhood to see the truth more clearly. Inside Karen's house, the blinds remained shut. No one saw her for the rest of the day. Some wondered what she might be planning next, but for now, silence surrounded her home. Tom finished his tea, placed the cup on the table beside him, and leaned back in his chair. He knew the story was not fully over. Karen was not the type to remain quiet for long. But whatever she planned next, Tom felt ready. The sheriff had seen the truth, the neighbors had seen the truth, and he himself had remained calm. The day ended with a sense of balance. Though Karen had tried to cause trouble, Tom had found something greater: the quiet strength of staying calm and the support of neighbors who valued peace. The following morning, the neighborhood seemed normal again. Children rode their bikes on the sidewalks, a few people jogged around the block, and the sound of lawnmowers buzzed in the distance. Tom enjoyed a calm breakfast and then stepped outside to water the plants near his porch. The events of the previous day still lingered in his mind, but he tried to focus on the quiet beauty of the morning. Yet Tom knew deep inside that Karen would not stay silent for long. She was known for being persistent. If one attempt failed, she usually found another way to push her rules and opinions. That thought stayed in his mind as he bent down to adjust a flower pot. Sure enough, around mid-morning, Tom noticed Karen's blinds shift. A shadow moved, and soon her front door opened. Karen stepped out with her usual clipboard clutched firmly in her hand. She walked down her driveway with sharp steps, looking around the neighborhood as if she were inspecting every inch of it. Her expression was serious, and her chin lifted high. Tom kept his focus on watering the plants, hoping she would continue walking past his house. But Karen stopped right at the edge of his yard. "Good morning, Tom," she said in a voice that tried to sound calm but carried a hint of challenge. "Good morning," Tom replied politely. Karen tapped her pen against the clipboard. "I have been thinking about yesterday. I believe the sheriff misunderstood the situation. My intention was not to accuse you but to protect the safety of our neighborhood. People rely on me to make sure everything stays in order." Tom straightened and met her gaze. "Karen, I respect that you care about the neighborhood. But calling the police because I came home early was not fair. I live here. I did nothing wrong. Karen's lips pressed into a thin line. Perhaps not wrong in the eyes of the law, but you must understand how unexpected changes cause confusion. If neighbors are not aware of your schedule, how can we be sure everything is as it should be? Tom paused, choosing his words carefully. Karen, this is my home. I should not have to announce my personal schedule to anyone. What matters is that I take care of my house and respect others. That is what I have always done. Karen scribbled something quickly on her clipboard. I will be raising this matter at the next HOA meeting. It is important to discuss how homeowners communicate their absences and returns. Rules help keep peace. Tom felt a flicker of frustration but stayed calm. If that is what you want to bring up, then I will be there to share my side too. The sheriff made it clear yesterday that I was in the right. Karen's cheeks turned slightly red, but she kept her posture firm. Without another word, she turned on her heel and marched back toward her house. As she disappeared inside, Tom sighed and shook his head. It was clear she was not finished. He decided not to let it spoil his day, but he knew the next HOA meeting would not be a quiet one. Later that afternoon, Tom received a knock on his door. When he opened it, he found Mrs. Green standing there with a warm smile and a small pie in her hands. I thought you could use something sweet, she said kindly. I know Karen has been stirring things up again. Tom accepted the pie with gratitude. Thank you, Mrs. Green. You did not have to, but it means a lot. She waved her hand lightly. Do not worry. Most of us know what is really going on. If Karen tries to make trouble at the meeting, you will not stand alone. People saw the sheriff clear things up, and they respect how calmly you handled it. Tom smiled. That gives me some comfort. I just want peace here. Mrs. Green patted his arm. You will have it. Sometimes it takes a little patience for the truth to shine. After she left, Tom placed the pie on the counter and thought about her words. It was true. Many neighbors had already shown support, and that was a strong reminder that he was not alone in this. Over the next 2 days, the neighborhood slowly settled back into its normal rhythm. Tom kept busy with small tasks around the house and even spent some time reading in his garden. But whenever he glanced toward Karen's house, he noticed she was busy too. She seemed to be writing more than usual on her clipboard, sometimes standing outside with a phone in her hand, pacing as if she were planning something. By the end of the week, a notice appeared in every mailbox. It was a printed letter from the HOA, announcing a special meeting to be held on Saturday evening. The notice mentioned important concerns about homeowner schedules and neighborhood safety. Tom smiled when he read the letter. He knew exactly whose words had shaped it. He also knew this was his chance to calmly present his side in front of everyone. Saturday evening arrived quickly. The HOA meeting was held in the community hall near the entrance of the neighborhood. The hall was simple, with folding chairs arranged in neat rows and a long table at the front. When Tom walked in, he noticed many neighbors already seated, talking quietly among themselves. Karen stood at the front, her clipboard in hand, ready to begin. As Tom took a seat, he felt the weight of eyes on him. Some neighbors gave him reassuring nods, while others whispered to one another. Karen called the meeting to order with her usual strict tone. She welcomed everyone, then immediately launched into her speech. Neighbors, we must talk about the importance of knowing when homeowners are away or returning. Unexpected changes can create confusion and even invite danger. Recently, one such situation caused me great concern, and I believe we need stricter guidelines to prevent this in the future. Her eyes flickered toward Tom as she spoke. A few neighbors shifted in their seats, already uneasy with her words. Tom sat quietly, waiting for his turn. He knew the moment would come when he could respond, and he intended to do so with calm and clarity. As Karen continued, the tension in the room began to grow. Some nodded in agreement with her, but others shook their heads. The air was filled with murmurs, and it was clear that this meeting was not going to end without a debate. Tom folded his hands together and prepared himself. The time had come for him to speak, and he knew what he would say. The community hall grew quiet after Karen finished her speech. Her voice had been steady, but her words left many neighbors shifting in their chairs. Some frowned in disagreement, others exchanged doubtful looks, and a few sat silently as though waiting to hear more before deciding what to think. Tom remained calm in his seat. He knew everyone was waiting for his response. Slowly, he rose and walked to the front of the room. His steps were steady, his face composed. The room fell into silence, and all eyes turned toward him. "Good evening, everyone," Tom began. His voice was clear but gentle. "I want to thank you all for coming tonight. I would like to share my side of the story that led to this meeting." He paused, letting the quiet settle before he continued. "Last week, I returned home from my cabin a day earlier than planned. That was my personal choice. I wanted to enjoy the comfort of my home. But instead of being welcomed back, I was met with a situation none of us should ever face. The police were called to my house because my return was seen as suspicious. The sheriff checked my identification and confirmed the truth. I live here. I belong here. I did nothing wrong." A ripple of murmurs spread across the room. Some neighbors nodded in agreement, while others looked at Karen with raised eyebrows. Tom kept his tone steady. "I respect the idea of keeping our neighborhood safe. We all want that. But safety does not mean questioning a neighbor's right to come home when they wish. Safety does not mean making false assumptions and calling the authorities without reason. Safety means trusting each other, respecting each other, and standing together when something real threatens us." Several neighbors clapped softly, their support growing more visible. Tom glanced toward Karen. Her lips were tight, her grip on the clipboard firm, but her eyes flickered with unease. "I take care of my home," Tom continued. "I keep my yard clean, I follow the HOA rules, and I respect all of you as neighbors. I believe that is what truly matters. Not the time I return from a trip, not whether I share my schedule, but whether I live here with respect and responsibility." The clapping grew louder. Mr. Allen stood and added his voice. "That is true. I have lived next door to Tom for years, and he has always been a good neighbor. What happened last week was not right." Lisa, sitting near the back with her daughter, raised her hand. "I agree. Tom has never caused problems. What concerned me was seeing the sheriff arrive for no reason. That was unfair, and it made our neighborhood look divided." More voices joined in. Mrs. Green spoke firmly. "We should not let one person's complaints create trouble for everyone. Tom handled himself with patience, and that showed real character. I think we should be proud to have him as part of this community." The room buzzed with agreement. Karen shifted uncomfortably, trying to raise her hand for attention. When the voices quieted, she spoke quickly. "You do not understand. My concern was for everyone's safety. If someone appears at a house unexpectedly, we cannot always assume it is the owner. We must take precautions." Tom turned toward her and replied respectfully. "Precaution is important, but there must also be fairness. If you had come to me directly and asked, I would have explained everything. Instead, you chose to call the police. That was not precaution. That was unnecessary. The sheriff's name was mentioned quietly among neighbors, reminding everyone of his words that day. He had made it clear there was no crime and no issue. Karen's face grew red as more people shook their heads. The support she had expected was slipping away, replaced by frustration from those around her. Mr. Allen stood again, his voice firm. Karen, no one is saying safety is unimportant. But safety must be balanced with trust. We cannot live in fear of each other. We are neighbors, not strangers. Lisa added, and if every small change in our daily lives is reported, we will never feel peace in this neighborhood. That is not the kind of place we want for our families. One by one, neighbors voiced their thoughts. Some spoke of the stress Karen's constant complaints had caused in the past. Others admitted they had stayed silent before but now felt it was time to speak up. The more they spoke, the clearer it became that the balance of the neighborhood was shifting. People were no longer willing to let Karen's strictness control their lives. Finally, the HOA president, an older woman named Clara who had been listening quietly, rose to her feet. She was known for her fairness and calm leadership. Her presence brought silence to the hall. "Thank you, everyone, for sharing your thoughts," Clara said. "It is clear we all value safety and respect. But it is also clear that what happened last week went too far. Calling the police on a homeowner who had every right to be in his own house was not the correct action. We must learn from this and move forward with better understanding." She looked directly at Karen. "Karen, your effort to keep order is noted, but this community cannot function if one person oversteps boundaries. We are neighbors first. Respect must go both ways." Karen opened her mouth to respond but stopped. The weight of the room's opinion pressed heavily against her. She lowered her eyes to her clipboard, but the authority she once held seemed to fade in that moment. Clara continued, "From this point forward, if any concern arises, it should be addressed directly with the homeowner first. Only if there is clear evidence of danger should the authorities be involved. Let us not waste resources or damage trust among us. We will not create new rules about personal schedules. People are free to come and go from their homes as they choose." The neighbors applauded. Tom felt a sense of relief wash over him. The truth had been spoken clearly, and the community stood together. Karen sat back down, silent and pale. For once, her clipboard remained unused. The meeting continued briefly with lighter topics, but the main matter had been settled. When it ended, neighbors gathered around Tom, shaking his hand and offering kind words. Some even invited him for coffee or future gatherings, gestures of friendship that felt genuine. As Tom walked home under the evening sky, he felt lighter than he had in days. The sheriff's visit, Karen's accusations, and the tension had all led to this turning point. His neighbors had seen the truth, and together they had chosen fairness over fear. Back on his porch, Tom sat with a quiet smile. The stars began to appear, and the cool night breeze carried a sense of peace. He knew Karen might never change completely, but she no longer held the same influence. The neighborhood had spoken, and respect had won. For Tom, that was enough. He had returned home early seeking rest, and though his welcome had been stormy, it had ended in calm. The lesson was simple but powerful. Patience, truth, and respect could overcome even the loudest complaints. As the night deepened, Tom leaned back and closed his eyes, grateful for the place he called home and the neighbors who now stood by his side.